We're going to start the fourth chapter of Bava Metzia. And we're going to talk about title transfer. We're going to talk about buying and selling. And it's very interesting that the chapter begins with what is fairly technical or basic information about how we conduct a transfer. In other words, how does title pass? But then we'll see as we go through the chapter that it gets into all kinds of ethical issues about overcharging and abuse. And as we've seen before, in the Mishnah of Bava Metzia seems on the surface of itself to be just a financial tractate, just dealing with financial stuff. But we'll see as we go through it that there are many values and principles which are not at all financial, mixed up inside it. And we'll even see this right at the beginning of the tractate in what may seem quite technical material. So we're going to jump into the Mishnah in a minute. But before we jump into the Mishnah, we need one more verse, one more pasuk. And it's from Vayikra, from Leviticus. And it's a surprising, it's out of place. I mean, we're going to read Mishpatim this Shabbat. We'll read the verses of damages. This verse from Vayikra, from Leviticus, it's chapter 25:14. Maybe it's a little bit surprising in terms of the law of title acquisition. When you sell something to your neighbor, or kano miyad amitecha, or buy something from your neighbor's hand. You buy it from your neighbor's hand. And the Gemara will learn from this use of the word hand in the context of selling that there has to be a physical transfer of an object via the hand. In other words, the buyer takes the object with his hand and pulls it over to him. That's when title transfer takes place, when he puts his hand on the object and he moves it towards him. And we'll explore this. And by the way, the verse finishes, Al tonu ish et achiv, you shall not wrong one another. So right away, right in the text of the Torah, we've got this equivalence of technical information as to how we trade and ethical information about how we behave when we're trading. So the fact that the Mishnah picks it up through this fourth chapter maybe is exemplified by the fact that the verse which the Mishnah is going to rely on in the Torah also seems to integrate these two types of ideas. That being said, let's jump into the Mishnah. HaKesef konet hazahav, ve'hazahav eino konet HaKesef. So we are going to take on title transfer by picking up something and drawing it towards us. But let's say we're at a money changer, and we've talked about money changers before. If we're changing money, let's say we're changing silver for gold, well, which of the two objects creates title transfer when we pick it up? And by the way, the principle generally running through the Mishnah is that the most convenient type of money is money, and whatever is on the other side of the transaction is the object where the title is changing. So when we say HaKesef konet hazahav, sorry, there's a mistranslation here. HaKesef konet hazahav, I'm sorry, my translation is wrong on the source sheet. HaKesef konet hazahav, silver acquires gold. When we're saying silver acquires gold, sorry, I'm going into I'm actually struck here. I'm struck here by the fact that I've completely unprepared this Mishnah, because the text we have in Kaufman is completely different from the text we have in most printed editions. And it's just taken me by surprise. yeah, I think Kaufman is the wrong way around here, because the classic text here is Hazahav Pone et Kesef. Gold acquires silver. That's the classic text. Gold acquires silver. Because when we trade, when we go into a shop or exchanging gold for silver, the principle that the Mishnah runs is that the money is essentially the most convenient currency to trade in. And the object being transferred is the least convenient. So in other words, and by the way, gold money is very, very inconvenient. It's like having $100 bill, having a piece of gold. Well, what are you going to do with $100 bill? So this Mishnah, this example where silver is acquiring gold, well, this is like someone who's walking into a shop to buy $100 bill, and he's handing out individual dollar bills. Now, the real currency are the dollar bills, not the 100. The object being acquired is the 100. The money are the individual dollar bills. The money is the kesef, the silver. The gold is what is being acquired. So when he seizes the gold, he takes title to the transaction. When he seizes the gold, he takes title, and he's bound to hand over the silver. In other words, the transaction is completed when the buyer picks up the gold. From that point, neither party can retract. He has to hand over the silver. Maybe that's what the Kaufman has in mind when it says "Hakesef konet hazahav." Most other texts have hazahav konet hakesef, and it doesn't work the other way. The hazahav eino konet hakesef. Silver doesn't acquire gold. The meaning of the Mishnah is that you don't go and buy 100 silver coins with a gold coin. That's not what you're considered to do. If you try to buy 100 silver coins with a gold coin, it's effectively considered as if you're selling a gold coin for 100 silver. And then the Mishnah continues with all these other examples, which are in line, by the way, with the printed text now. The Kaufman and the printed text are now in line. Copper coins are much more useful than silver coins. It's like having change in your pocket rather than having a dollar bill. So with copper, you can acquire, you can pay with copper to acquire silver, and you cannot pay with silver to acquire copper. Ma'ot haraot konot yafot. Bad coins acquire good coins. So the common currency, the common currency in this case, I'm just going really slow here because I'm not sure I'm correctly understanding the Mishnah. The common currency, I'm not sure the Mishnah. I'm not sure I've got the Mishnah the right way around. The bad coins. Ma'ot hara'ot konos. Well, let's just look at the Mishnah. Ma'ot hara'ot konos yafot. Bad coins acquire good ones, in the sense that at this point, the good coins should be considered the real currency, and the bad coins should not. So I don't understand this. So the bad coins are being acquired by the good ones. Ma'ot hara'ot konot. The Mishnah, I'm not sure which way the Mishnah goes around. Vehayafot einan konot et hara'ot. And the good ones don't purchase the bad ones. And then the final example, asimon. And asimon is a sort of blank coin. It's an unminted coin. Asimon konet hamatbea vehamatbea eino konet asimon. So a blank can acquire a minted coin, but a minted coin can't acquire an asimon, a blank. Movable movable property acquires coin. In other words, if you go into shop and buy some movable property, when you put your hand on the movable property, effectively title transfers. So the coin changes in legal terms, the coin changes hand on the other side, even if you haven't handed it over. And coins don't acquire movable property. Handing over money to buy some movable property doesn't give you right to that property. It's only when you touch the property, when it enters your hand, as we said at the beginning of the shiur, it's only when you take possession of the movable property that you take title over it and are bound then to deliver the cash. And Mishnah concludes that klal kol hamitaltalim konim ze et ze. Anything that is movable can acquire something else that's movable. In other words, the thing that's movable affects title transfer. It moves first. And the Mishnah then goes on to explain, Keitzad, how does it work? Mashach mimenu perot velo natan lo ma'ot. So somebody pulled the produce away from him. So he's going into a shop, he's buying fruit. He pulls the fruit away from the seller towards himself. Velo natan lo ma'ot. He didn't give him the money. He can't go back. As soon as he's pulled in the fruit, he's effectively executed a contract and he's bound to hand over the money. And it doesn't work the other way. If he's given over the money and hasn't pulled the produce away from him, away from the seller, he can go back. And by the way, the Gemara and the Rambam will point out that actually at this point, both of them can go back. I mean, the buyer can go back because he can decline to complete the transaction and just demand his money back. But of course, the seller could go back because the seller could just run away, just take his stuff away, avoid completing the transaction. And so the Mishnah observes, so they can both retract. Aval amru, but they said, Misha parame anshe dor hamabul, he that punished the generation of the flood. So these are the generation that essentially knew bad stuff was going on, but they didn't say a word. They were passive. Maybe they saw what was going on, but they said nothing. They said nothing. And the Rambam, by the way, connects them to the people of Sodom and the people who have the dispersion. And again, the Midat Sodom is kind of what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours. You know, the people of Sodom are basically, they're also kind of passive, really. They don't stand up for ethics. So the Mishnah says, Misha parame anshe dor hamabul, he who punished the generation of the flood, Atid lehipare mimi lehiparea mimi she'eno omed b'diburo. He that punished the generation of the flood will punish someone who does not stand by his word. So yes, indeed, you can walk into a shop and promise to buy fruit and hand over the money. And yes, in theory, you could change your mind 10 minutes later and say, no, I don't want those oranges. Or I don't want that sofa. But that's not what we do. That's not what we do. And Rabbi Shimon closes with an obscure comment. Rabbi Shimon omer kol she'hakesef biyado yado le'elyona. Rabbi Shimon says, he that has the money in his hand has the upper hand. In other words, he seems to be able to, for example, refuse to go ahead with the transaction. And the halacha doesn't go according to Rabbi Shimon. We're actually not quite sure what he means. There are many, many possible explanations about Rabbi Shimon, and maybe we'll figure that out as we learn other Mishnayot.